Welcome to Machine Minds, where technology and humanity meet. I'm your host, Greg Tarusian, founder of Samson Rose, a recruiting and search business focused on the robotics and AI industries. The Machine Minds show is where we dive deep into the intricate world of robotics and artificial intelligence. As a staffing industry leader with a passion for the frontiers of technology, I'm pleased to be bringing you intimate conversations with the founders, investors, and trailblazers who are at the heart of the AI and robotics revolution. In each episode, we dig into their journeys, the applications of the products they're working on, and the breakthroughs that are shaping our future. Join us as we explore how these machine minds are transforming the way we live, work, and understand our world. Whether you're an entrepreneur, a tech enthusiast, or just curious about this amazing field, you'll learn something new with each episode. Let's delve into the extraordinary. Let's delve into machine minds. Hello and welcome to Machine Minds. I'm your host, Greg Tarusian, founder of Samson Rose, your robotics talent search partner. And on today's episode, I'm joined by Leo Chen, Director of US Operations at Engineered Arts. Thanks for being on the show today, Leo.
Thank you, Greg. Actually, not only am I on the show, you get Amica desktop as well. I think Amica tends to steal the show, so I might as well introduce the robot before it gets too far. Yeah.
Putting her front and center. Yeah, anyone who is only listening on audio, you definitely want to check it out on YouTube as well, because Amica, the desktop version, is sitting there front and center. So very excited for this. Let's jump into it. Leo, before we get into the meat of Engineered Arts and Amica and everything like that, I'd love to start with you and your journey into robotics. It's kind of fascinating. What kind of sparked your initial interest in this field, and how did it lead you to where you are today?
Yeah, I'm really lucky in that I get to live out my childhood dream. When I was quite young, my mother let me watch Empire Strikes Back, and I saw R2-D2 roll across the screen, and instantly I was like, you know what? I want to be a part of that. You know, I had no idea what engineering was. I take that back. I was lucky enough to have a father who was a mechanical engineer. So I had some idea of what engineering was, but I had no idea what went into a robot. It was just like, that looks cool. I want to be a part of that. How do I get there? And even as a kid, I was part of First Robotics. Actually, the second iteration of First Robotics, the second year they ran it was my senior year at high school. And I started my high school robotics team. Was fortunate enough to attend UC Berkeley for EECS, Electrical Engineering, Computer Science. Did some research for a variety of professors, one of which was Dr. Ron Thiering, who did a lot of milliscale robotics. So he's probably most famous for his synthetic gecko hairs for adhesion. But beyond that, he also built out mini cockroaches and flies using carbon fiber back in the day. I mean, this is back in like 2007, 8, 9. So I got exposed to robotics pretty early. Between my junior and senior year of college, got a small NSF grant to build and design a robotic eel. So I had fun doing that. Named it Unagi for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
But that was super fun. And then after I graduated college, I worked for a company called Linear Technology, an analog IC firm. So if you were like a big enough company, an Apple, a Cisco, or Google, you got one of me to sort of help you use our products if you were having issues. It was a great career stop for a young engineer because I got to work on a variety of really cool things. Got to, consult on a little bit of the first generation iPad, for instance, before we even knew it was the iPad. First generation Tesla Roadster, things like the second generation Segway, a ton of cars and other stuff and medical devices. So as a young engineer, I was exposed to a lot of these cool different things out there. But then I kind of got tired of babysitting other people's children. Like, it was great, but it was always like, here's a problem, solve the problem, and you hand the child back to the parent. It was never yours, right? You never own the product. You own the problem at the moment, but you never own the product. And one of my rock climbing buddies actually gave me a referral to an unannounced project at Google, and managed to hop across the road there from where we were initially in Milpitas to where Google was in Mountain View. Got a job there working for an unannounced project, which they promptly canceled after 2 weeks there.
Nice.
I spent 7 years at Linear Technology, and all of a sudden, after 2 weeks, they killed my project. But luckily, I was able to hop to Project Loon over there, which was balloon internet, kind of Starlink competitor, but with balloons instead of satellites, and worked on giant balloon launching robots for them. Had a great time over there, learned all about field work, learned all about testing and putting robots out in the real world. So that was super fun and a really, really cool growth opportunity for me. From there, unfortunately, Google Loon did fold. And I went to Hayward, where I worked for Verdon Robotics, which is an agricultural robotics project, and ran their electrical engineering team for 2 years. Was there for 2 years and then moved on over to engineered arts, where I am currently running the US operations for them. So been a little bit all over the place, but have been fortunate enough for the past decade plus, been in robotics, which has been really fun and great learning opportunity.
Love that. Yeah, I love that. It's kind of like a full-scale view of the robotics companies and ecosystems in the US. How did you actually find out? I mean, we're going to jump into engineered arts now, but obviously I know, and you know, they're a British company. How did you find out about them and then get this opportunity for the role in the US?
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's where a good recruiting team and sourcing team really come into play. Yeah. I had no idea they were hiring for a director of US operations. Funny enough, when I was graduating college, so I graduated university in 2007, and unfortunately, I was not the best student in the world, and I didn't have all my ducks in a row. So about 6 months before I was supposed to graduate, I remember sitting at my desk in my apartment, just panicking because I didn't actually have a job lined up. And I knew I had wanted to get into robotics, but I didn't know what companies are hiring. So way back in 2007, I had actually Googled, robotics jobs and came across engineered arts way back in the day.
Really? Okay.
And they were hiring for stuff. But at the time, I was like, you know what? I can't move to England. Like, that's way too far. What am I doing? Yeah. No, I need to stay in California. But I really didn't think about them up until very, very recently, when they had a recruiting firm, their sourcer reached out to me with a really interesting message like, hey, do you want to work on humanoid robots? We have a company that's interested in your background. That got my interest and started talking to them. The recruiter was very, very knowledgeable about engineered arts, could speak fluently about their company mission, what they were trying to do, what they were trying to establish in the United States. And I was hooked. So I started talking to their staff, had an opportunity to talk to Morgan Rowe, who's been there for over a decade and a half, I want to say, and runs their main operation. So he's their COO. Talked to him, fell in love with the mission, really admired kind of the company persona. They weren't so much about valuation. They're about building cool things for awesome people. And then I had an opportunity to talk to Will Jackson, their founder and CEO. And this was like a true rag to riches story. Will had built this company starting from his garden shed in Cornwall. And I don't know what your audience is, Greg, but Cornwall to me was a huge surprise. Like, I knew very little about Cornwall, knew very little about Falmouth, where the company is right now. And one of the first things that I had to do when I joined this company was spend a month there. And
really?
Yeah. I learned that you're supposed to put your clotted cream on top of your jelly for scones, right? Or biscuits.
Very important details.
Yeah, very, very important details, especially when you're talking to people from Devon, apparently.
Yes, definitely from Devon, yeah.
Yeah, spent a month out there, actually 2 months cool. Over the course of 3. Spent a month out there, spent a month here in the United States, and went back to the UK for another month for training and everything else. But the best way I can describe the vibe of Falmouth, it's like a British version of Santa Cruz.
Interesting.
Kind of surfer culture, has a university, really cool people, some hippie vibes, some artsy fartsy vibes, some Trustafarians, But
what time of year were you there?
Say again, sorry?
What time of year were you there?
Oh, I was lucky that I was there during summer, basically.
Oh, man. What? Yeah, you were spoiled.
Yeah, it was gorgeous. It was gorgeous. Yeah. I fell in love with pasties and sausage rolls, which you just can't find in California.
You don't. Yeah, yeah. And there's a couple of spots. There's like British pubs in LA that have like a bakery section next door, which
It's
is
not the same.
it's not the same, but I
Yeah.
mean it's as close you can get.
Yeah. And so like I loved the spot, but it wasn't a place where I would have envisioned this crazy high tech, awesome robotics company be founded. That's just
Definitely not. Yeah,
yeah.
definitely not.
But here we are. And I want to say that Engineered Arts is probably one of the few humanoid robotics companies that's actually pushing out real products that people are buying. And it's a company that's actually profitable and has been for quite a long time.
So that's a great segue into talking about the company in a bit more detail. So for our guests who aren't familiar, and I'm pretty sure everyone at this point has seen one of your robots because they are probably the most viral ones out there, most lifelike faces. They've been in a lot of the conferences, they do entertainment, etc. Amica is the main one. Obviously, we've got the desktop version here. But for our guests who aren't familiar, can you give us the kind of elevator pitch or overview of Engineered Arts and the history there?
Yeah. We've been around for a little over 20 years. We were founded in 2004 in Will Jackson's backyard garden shed. And since its inception, the company's mission was around building humanoid robots that could provide compelling human interactions. We as a company don't believe that humanoids are meant to be just stuck in a factory somewhere, stacking boxes or building cars or doing whatever it is in a dark factory. The human face is one of the highest bandwidth forms of communication available to us. And, well, thanks to the advent of large language models, we can provide really compelling conversation and interactions that bring moments of joy to people. And that's our mission right here, right now. We're in a couple of different verticals. The most obvious one is entertainment. If you go to the Rosicrucian Museum in San Jose, California, you can see one of our custom robots dressed up as the Egyptian god Thoth, conversing with people as if it were an Egyptian god in character, fully powered by AI. If you go to Las Vegas right now, you can go to the Sphere. You can see multiple of our robots inside, custom robots conversing with people before they attend a show. So entertainment, like pretty obvious application, right? Whether it's informational at a museum or guest interaction or whatever else, provides a really unique, futuristic feeling interaction. So that's one of them. The other vertical that we're pretty firmly entrenched in is research. University of California, Merced, University of Auckland, I want to say, they have robots for HRI, human-robot interaction research. We have a robot in Clemson University. I believe in Europe, we have several as well, all around studying human interaction with robots, as well as being an incredible platform for AI study, embodied AI in particular. The final sort of thing that we're in, vertical that we're in, is education. There's a school system down in San Diego County, a charter school system that we have partnered with, and they're actually utilizing our robots right here, right now for students, but not just students, for teachers as well. So the robots provide an executive coach persona. It can provide a wellness persona where it can help coach either students or faculty with like tough issues, like, hey, I'm feeling stressed right now. I feel like I can't talk to my manager, my superintendent or something. Can you coach me on that? Can you help me deal with stressful moments? That sort of stuff. But it can also act as a teaching aid where it can showcase different ways of getting points across to non-traditional students. So education, research, entertainment, that's where we are right here, right now. The things that we're kind of interested in moving into in the future, in the very near future, receptionist roles at retail locations, high-end retail, banks, that sort of stuff, patient intake at doctor's offices, elder care for healthcare. 94% of our nursing homes here in the United States are understaffed. And one of the biggest problems facing elder care professionals is actually senior loneliness. Like, how do you engage with these people? How do you communicate with them? How do you lift their spirits? Well, we're hoping Amica can help fill a niche there. So, yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. And I think from all of the humanoids we've seen right now, you are by far the most lifelike facially. And if you're talking about, there's other robots for like elder care, like there's one out of Australia, the name escapes me right now, but like it does more like bubbles and plays music. So it looks toy-like, but it's very engaging. But from a human to robot interaction type thing, you want that lifelike face, be able to have a conversation. And I encourage people to look up videos of Amica and just see the interactions that you can have with the robot when you've been like trade shows and stuff like that. It's very, very impressive. Very impressive.
Yeah, I mean, I will admit that it's one of those things that you have to experience to truly believe. Like, it's one thing for us to sit here and be like, oh yeah, it's amazing. But the thing is, so when did OpenAI release ChatGPT to the public? It was like November 2 years ago, right? And I'm sure you started using it. You're in tech, you have to know the field. So I'm sure you started playing around with it, right? So I have a question for you. How long did it take to go from toy to tool for you?
It was probably like I think probably GPT-3 around that time, like came out. Yeah, for me, because of working something new into my workflow, making it sticky and trying to shift and adjust my way of working to now, instead of, I'm going to Google something or I'm going to go and use my old templates, I'm now leaning to ChatGPT. It was a bit of an adjustment, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, so for me, when it dropped, it was at first a toy, right? Like you just play with it, you try to make it say obscene things, whatever it might be. But for me, like it took about, I'd say 2 to 3 weeks to go from something that I looked forward to playing with to a tool set in my arsenal that was just like, it was effective, but it wasn't something that I necessarily got excited about. Kind of like when you have Microsoft Word, I don't know too many people that are super stoked to double click on Microsoft Word or open up Excel, right? They're amazing tools, but they're tools. And so when I was talking to Will and Morgan about, hey, okay, you guys stuck a large language model into a physical embodied platform. Great. So what? Well, that got thrown back in my face the first time I interacted with the robot. It was such a different experience because at that point, I had already sort of categorized large language models as tools, right? Didn't play with it at all. It was just, I knew when to reach for it. Well, the first time that I got to interact with an Amica, they had to like kick me out of the office, even though I was jet lagged and tired. Like, they were trying to close up the office. I think it was like 6:30 or 7 p.m. And poor Jill, one of the OGs at Engineered Arts, she's sitting there trying to be polite and trying to like wait for me to be done to lock up. And I'm sitting there just trying to talk to the robot more. It's such a different experience once you pair it with this like super realistic face and the way that it can convey emotion. It's kind of the difference, like the thing that Will Jackson likes to say, it's the difference between watching Jaws on the big screen, which is awesome, but it's a difference between that and swimming with sharks in a shark cage. It makes the experience so much more visceral.
Yeah, that's a very good analogy. Let's talk a bit about the lineup here of the product. So you mentioned a few of the use cases, receptionists, etc. There's the education side. So you've got robots like Amica, the full humanoid. We've obviously on camera right now got desktop version. I saw there was a male version as well. You've got Robo Thespian. Yeah, can you just highlight the different ones and what's different and their use case? No?
Yeah. Right now, there's kind of 3 main robots in our product line that we're actively trying to push out to the world. Amica, which is a full body, 6 feet tall, about 2 meters for those of you who don't use Freedom units. Robot articulating arms, hands, neck, really expressive face. You have the Amica desktop, which is smaller form factor, same expressive face, but no arms, nor torso that can move. And then finally, we have what we call the Mesmer lineup. The Mesmer is essentially the same tech behind an Amica, but put into a much more realistic human form factor. It's designed to mimic human. So we've used Mesmers to try to get into the market segments like patient simulation in medical fields, training doctors, training nurses how to interact with patients. We can simulate a stroke patient or someone else going through an emotional episode. And that way they get a very consistent experience that the teacher or instructor can control. Mesmers can be used for that. We've used them for entertainment. One of the earliest Mesmers was actually used to push out a media campaign with Westworld, which is kind of fitting. It sat in a pub and was teleoperated by the actual actor, but it looked like the actual actor, but was a robot underneath. The Egyptian god Thoth that I mentioned earlier is actually technically a mesmer, but at its core, the technology is very, very similar to what's in an Amica unit. Yeah. Now, we've built things like robo-thespians in the past. They're a little less facial fidelity, a little lower cost. But as of now, we're not actively pushing that out to customers. We're maintaining current customers' robo-thespians if they have them in museums and such. But we're very squarely focused on Amica and the variations of Amica right now.
Lovely. Yeah. And I encourage, again, everyone to look at the website because you've got all of this on there. So the humanoid market has obviously been heating up a lot in the last few years. It's getting pretty competitive, I guess, like a race for certain sectors we talked about, or you mentioned like the manufacturing, logistics, etc. You guys are positioned very differently, but I'm also curious about what technological advancements set Engineered Arts apart from other robotics companies. Is it primarily the facial? Is it the actual like body, etc.?
I'd say there's two things that make us special. One of which is definitely the face. We have the highest fidelity face in a robot that I've ever seen. And while there are other competitors that come close, nobody's been able to manufacture them at the scale that we have, nor have they demonstrated they are capable of maintaining a fleet of robots out in the wild. For anyone who's been in robotics or has deployed robots out to a field, it's a different experience once they're not just in lab. It's a whole nother ball game. It's the Wild West. Things break. You have to figure out how to maintain them, how to fix things, how to diagnose. And that's where the second part of what makes Engineered Arts special comes into play. We built up our operating system, our custom operating system up over the past 2 decades. We don't run ROS. We have something we call Tritium. And Tritium allows us to dive into the robot down to a level that I have not seen out of anything else. I can look at each individual actuator, look at encoder counts, look at current draw, look at simulated temperature estimates, look at range of motion, graph those out across a certain segment of time. If I have a robot broken and let's say, Clemson University calls me up right now and they're like, hey, we got to demonstrate this to the NSF. They're coming by and Amica's lip doesn't look right. I bet you in less than 5 minutes, I can be in that robot, tell you exactly what might be wrong with it, tell you how to patchwork fix it, and have the replacement part out to you within the next day. So that's what makes us special. We're able to utilize that combination of hardware and software to make sure that you have uptime, you have reliability, and you have a robot that functions.
And that's what people want. If you're going to spend the money on getting one, if you're actually going to adopt that technology, that's normally the biggest questions and hurdles when people are looking to bring robots into their environment, regardless if it's entertainment or a museum, education, whatever. It's like directly or indirectly, it's uptime, reliability. And if it does break, who's going to deal with this? Because I'm not a roboticist.
Yeah, 100%. But it's also to kind of tie it back a little bit to Samson Rose and what you do in recruiting and sourcing. One of the things that I look for when I'm hiring is hands-on field experience. Whether or not you're a new grad college kid who has experience building Formula SAE cars, or you ran the robotics club, or even if you were part of the concrete canoe club. All those things light me up because it means that you've been out in the wild working on something outside of a sterilized lab experience. That means so much to companies nowadays.
100%. Most clients that we hire for tend to look for that. And it's tough because, like you said, there's not a lot of robotics companies that have deployed a whole fleet. Having onesies and twosies is fine. And it is what it is in a lot of the startup world. But when you're coming to, there's very few that have, in a very innovative market anyway, like the newer robots that have deployed 100 plus and are actually maintaining them and are figuring out break fixes, remote intervention, remote teleoperation, whatever it is that you have to deal with. So yeah, it's tough, but I agree. Even the grads, like I always tell students, try and get involved with whatever internships you can, with whatever competitions you can, whatever side projects, because that's going to really boost your experience, but also your profile and your resume.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I actually mentally had like a list of schools that I love hiring from because they do certain things. One of them is actually Northeastern. Northeastern has a really, really cool way that they approach internships. So unlike most universities, like a typical US-based university, you maybe have summer internships, right? Or if you're lucky, you have like a co-op during the year for maybe a semester. Northeastern turns out on its head. I forgot the ratio, but I think it's like over the total of a 4-year career, these kids actually get 3 times as much like in office or hands-on experience than a typical grad, just because they push you out to internships.
So is it a co-op program, like a 6 month?
Yeah, it's a co-op program. Yeah, you get college credit for it and everything.
Awesome. Yeah, Drexel does a similar one as well. So yeah, we used to do that when I was internal, and we had an internship program. It was amazing hiring interns that were on a co-op, because you could obviously give them that student credit like you mentioned, but you knew you had them for a long period of time. You knew that they were engaged. But if you've got them for their second or third internship, they've also got some commercial experience as well. Like, this isn't their first rodeo. So yeah, it's awesome.
No, I think there's something to be said about younger engineers learning how to survive in the corporate world. Like, that's a skill set I completely lacked when I graduated college, because I had done research all 4 years. I was buried in a lab. I wouldn't have hired me, just looking at my experience. But then learning how to work in a corporate world is a skill set. And I think one that people sometimes undervalue.
Yeah, no, it's very true. You also see it when people are looking at engineers or scientists coming out of labs, like you mentioned, but that are so focused on research. Even if you've done like your PhD and stuff, that transition to commercial, that transition to the corporate world isn't always easy. And there's a lot of like disconnect that you have to really piece together, especially in a startup, unless you've got a research function or the person leading the team has a research background and understands how to utilize that experience. But very different pace, very different incentives and goals from research to commercial. Yeah. So I want to talk about your perspective on the industry in general. Right now there's rapid advancements with AI, and you mentioned about, putting a large language model in Amica, etc. But how does engineered arts integrate AI into your whole fleet? And like, what's your kind of viewpoint on that for the future as things evolve?
Well, at our core, we're a hardware platforms company. We know we're not going to be able to compete with Anthropic, with Google, with OpenAI, or even with like Grok or anything like that. So when it comes to things like large language models or ASR models or TTS providers, we're essentially a system integrator, and we like to keep our options open. Right now, Amica's stack. We use Whisper for ASR. We typically use Poly for TTS. A lot of what you see in terms of the conversation is GPT-4o, but all of that can be very rapidly swapped around. One of my engineers, Mac Madison, swapped it out from OpenAI's product to Gemini for a demonstration for a customer because they wanted to utilize Gemini for their engagement, and that took maybe a week. When we saw that a company called Cartesia had really awesome capabilities when it came to TTS and voices, we were able to swap to that as an alternative provider in a shorter amount of time. Or 11 Labs, and before we were using Whisper for ASR, we were using Google's sort of ASR pipeline. And unfortunately, that was a little slower than Whisper at the time, so we swapped over. It's, for us, technology and these different software packages are a means to an end. And the end is bringing these moments of joy and wonderment to the people who interact with our robots. So for us, every single time, you hear about a DeepSeek or a new, let's say, OpenAI GPT 4.5 just got released, right? Like when these things get released, we put in time and effort to evaluate them, but we always evaluate them from the lens of how can this better improve the human experience when they talk to our robots. That's what we care about.
Yeah, love that. As robots become more human-like, are there any ethical considerations that you guys take into account during development? You always got these people that are like, the robots are coming, or they're going to take over, or news of robots making themselves and all this other stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're definitely lucky in that in the space that we're in, it's very clear that we're not trying to take your job, right? Like we're here to augment your experience. We're here to act as an assistant to you. It's not to replace. And that's been very, very consistent in our messaging across the board. Even when we go to the school district down in San Diego County, like there was a little bit of hesitation with some of the teachers. They're like, whoa, what is this? Like, I don't want this to replace me. It's like, no. We're not here to replace you. Nothing will ever replace the human experience, what you bring to the table when you connect with these students. But we also know that there are certain things in your life that you could probably get away or that you don't want to do as much, And we want to take that off your hands. We want to take those repetitive tasks off your hands. We want to free you up to do what you're really, really good at. And that's the messaging that we take on. As far as the other ethical concerns, it's interesting. We do a lot of international engagements, right? Like all across Europe, we've gone to Asia, we've gone all across North America, we've gone down to Mexico. We're hoping that in the near future, we'll actually get to go down to Brazil. We're in talks with a company down in Brazil, test out Amica's Portuguese. So like we've gone all over the world. And it's interesting the difference between Western culture and Eastern culture in terms of how we approach and what our initial knee-jerk reactions around robotics is. If you were to go to Europe or the United States and you have a crowded room and you have everyone sort of like shout out the first robot that comes to their mind, most of the time it's going to be Terminator, iRobot, most recently the robots from Ex Machina, even RoboCop sometimes, and these are all robots that sort of have an adversarial relationship with humanity. However, if you go to Eastern countries like Taiwan, Japan, China, and you ask them the same question, the answer is very, very different because of the media that people consume when they're younger. It's not so much Terminator, it's not so much iRobot, it's like Xiao Ding Dong, this like tiny little blue cat-like robot that helps people, or Gundam, or these other helper robots, that are in Western consciousness, like Rosie, from the Jetsons, that sort of stuff. But for whatever reason, we tend to gravitate more towards that adversarial relationship in media. So that does shape how we view robots.
Yeah, that is really, I wonder why that is. Maybe it's more like intrinsic, the same clickbait kind of gene in people's head where they like bad news over other, because like you look at movies like Big Hero 6 or things like that, they're helper robots, or even the new film Wild Robots, like such a cool message and great film, but people are always going to like think about Terminator.
But that's also the older generation, right? Like the kids growing up nowadays, hopefully they'll say Big Hero 6 or Wild Robot or like WALL-E, for instance, and Eve. Yeah, there can be a shift, but shifts take time. And our hope is that we've done a good enough job with Amica that we can provide these moments of joy for children who are interacting with it. And maybe someday in the future, it won't be Terminator, it won't be RoboCop or Ex Machina. It'll be, Amica. And I had a great time talking to Amica at this museum or like in class or whatever it might be.
True. Outreach program.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing.
100%.
What future innovations or projects are you most excited about at Engineered Arts? If there's any you can actually talk about.
Oh man, there's so much cool stuff in the pipeline. Hopefully we'll kill me for this one. But I am so excited about hands. Probably people expected me to say legs, but I'm not so much excited about the legs, even though we're very, very heavily invested in bipedal locomotion, and that is on our roadmap. But closer to reality are dexterous hands for Amica. So right now, Amica's hands, the full body version, not this bust version, are more around expression, right? They're there to be animated, but they can't really grasp anything. Well, we're looking to change that. We're building out hands that can pick up small objects like chess pieces, checker pieces, but more importantly, we're building out hands that can communicate in American Sign Language. So we're hoping to open up the accessibility of a robot like Amica to beyond just those of us who communicate in typical ways. Yeah. But also being able to interact with physical objects, my God, like I want to play chess against Amica.
Oh, yeah. That tough one to beat, probably. Yeah, I was just thinking for the home help or aged care and stuff like that, sign language game changer. I didn't even think about that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, being able to pick up small objects, amazing. But at our core, once again, we are a human-centric communications robot. That's what we build.
Yeah. How do you envision the role of humanoid robots evolving over the next decade? Because there's multiple verticals you guys are involved with. We mentioned the ones that other people are focusing on. How do you think it's going to shape out?
I'm actually quite pessimistic about humanoid robots, which is interesting coming from a guy who's investing so much time and effort into helping build out a humanoid robotics company. I see humanoid robots going the same way that self-driving cars have been going, honestly. And that's not shade at any other company. That's not shade at self-driving cars, but you can kind of see the pattern, right? 4 years ago, there's this huge boom hiring in self-driving cars. You had a ton of companies out there, Cruise, Waymo, Uber had their own self-driving car division, Lyft had their own level 5 division, Apple was secretly building a self-driving car. And then what happened? There was consolidation. It was like the strong survive, you know? There were companies that got culled because their value proposition just wasn't good enough, or they didn't have enough runway. People overestimated the complexity of the problem. You know, you have Elon Musk promising everyone their Teslas are capable of full self-driving like 5 years ago, right? Whatever it was. There was a lot of hype and there was a lot of promise. But then people came to realize that the timeline, or the promises were real, but the timeline wasn't. And you got to extend that timeline. I think people quickly realized the same thing around humanoid robots. Why? Well, if you see a lot of these tech demos, what do they focus on? They focus on mobility, right? It's always like a 1X robot doing yoga or helping out around a home, or, you know, the hype thing around Tesla's Optimus was that making drinks. Figure shows it working around a home. Well, here's the truth of the matter. You and I, as human beings, we can rep out an 8-hour workday with maybe like 6 hours of sleep and 1,500 calories, right? Like we wouldn't be very happy, but we could survive on that. The battery life for humanoid robots just isn't there yet. The power density for actuators isn't there yet. The power density for energy storage isn't there yet. The safety isn't there yet as well either. You know, like, why are you constraining yourself to the humanoid form with a lot of these robots, which is a really tough form to actually work within? And you're putting it into a situation where the humanoid form might not actually be the ideal form factor to solve that problem. We have this sort of ego as humans, I feel like. We want to build stuff in our shape and form, you know? Look as far as our mythology and our gods and goddesses, whatever culture and your background is. Most of them are humanoid. Like Egyptians have animal heads. Hindu gods and goddesses have also some animal features and multiple limbs. But at their core, they're still looking like us. And I feel like when we design physical objects, we do that as well. But that also does a discredit to our own creativity. Like, why be human when you can be superhuman?
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. I was just at the Upfront Summit, which is Upfront Ventures, but this a couple of day event on every year, VCs and very interesting speakers. And one of the talks that I was lucky enough to see was Lux Capital's founder, Josh Wolf. And the topic of humanoids came up, and he said very similar thing to you. He's like, I don't think that's the right form factor because of, why would you, the example was great because you hear the argument a lot of the times, and then you're like, legs aren't as safe, put wheels, whatever, it can be stationary, etc. He used a very simple example of opening a bottle of water. He's like, the human hand isn't great, isn't the best tool to do that. And then we also have all the complexities of, the angle and, the torque and etc. and twisting. He's like, you could probably have like a different end effector that pokes out of an arm that just grabs on top, spins it off in 2 seconds. And he's like, that's the form that you probably want from a robot if it is going to be like a humanoid, but with like a Swiss Army knife approach. I was like, oh, genius. Didn't even think about that.
No, I agree. It's why limit yourself to something that you see in front of you? Like the argument that, humanoids are great for a general purpose robot because the world is built for this form factor doesn't really make sense to me. When you consider most humanoids right now are not safe to be around in terms of like, full-size humanoids. Sure, those smaller ones from China, when they fall over, they're not going to kill you. But like Atlas, amazing robot, absolutely world-class, amazing robot. But if something were to go wrong and it tips over on me, I would not be in very good shape. Therefore, I don't want to be working next to one in a factory. And with OSHA and ADA compliance and everything else, sure, yes, our space that we exist in today is designed around the human form, but it's also not that hard for non-human forms to get around in, thanks to those regulations and governing bodies.
True. Yeah, I think you're spot on, and I agree with the whole self-driving car similarities, because even if the technology is there, like even if 5 years ago self-driving cars were able to do level 5 autonomy on the roads, regulation, safety, all the bodies, and then also the infrastructure that wasn't there to enable that was moving, and always does move, a lot slower than the technology. And it's going to be the same case with robots, because maybe you'll be able to bring them into your own personal home or private land or whatever, but when we're talking mass market and having them in public or schools or hotel, all of this other stuff, it's not going to happen anytime soon. We'd like it to, maybe, but yeah. I just had such a funny thought of all the people that are scared of robots, and they love all these humanoid movies like Ex Machina and all of that stuff. And you're here talking all this smack about humanoids right next to Amica, and she's going to go back and tell her friends. Cover her ears.
Well, it's interesting though. There are a lot of people out there who are scared of robots. But I would argue that most people in the United States actually interact with robots more than they could ever imagine in their day-to-day life.
100%.
Your car is a freaking robot. Like if you drive a modern car, it decides when to shift for you. It can probably help you keep within the lane. It decides when to brake for you when you're not paying attention to the road. It can help you counteract a skid. It's making intelligent decisions.
Yeah.
You're driving a robot.
Yeah. The not analogy, what's the word that I'm looking for? I guess the explanation or categorization someone was saying was, that you're not working, or it's an accepted product, or you're not working on a robot when people stop calling it a robot and it's an appliance. Or it's So yeah, it's true. You think about your Roomba as well. No one's like, I'm going to turn on my robot to clean the floor.
Just a little vacuum cleaner.
Exactly. What advice would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs looking to enter the robotics field as a whole, because you've had such an interesting career across all of it, or even the humanoid field?
Well, let's address the humanoid one first. I actually help certain venture capitalist firms or investors do due diligence on robotic products or robotic companies. And the first question that I ask whenever we're trying to evaluate another humanoid or robotic company is, why the humanoid form? you have to be able to tell a compelling story of why you are restricting yourself into a form factor that is honestly quite challenging. Like, it's not easy to fit things within this form. It just isn't. So why are you adding that extra challenge to yourself? And you need to be very, very intentional in why you're doing that and make sure that you have a true North Star that makes sense for the humanoid form. So that would be my advice for an entrepreneur who's looking at humanoid robotics. Now, as far as just general robotics, what value proposition are you trying to, you should be able to answer the question, what value proposition are you trying to provide other than cost reduction? Because I see so many robotics entrepreneurs out there whose sole value proposition when they're talking to venture capitalists, potential customers, is I will reduce your bill for whatever it is. And then it becomes a race to the bottom, right? You're not providing additional value, you're saving them money. And when someone else comes along who can save them even more money, they're not invested in you. You haven't provided anything that they'll continue to come back for. So
interesting. Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, hadn't thought about it like that. Yeah, you hear about the reason that a lot of these companies exist is for like the workforce deficit, or like say cost or whatever it is, safety and things like that. But making sure you've got those things buttoned up to communicate and present is very important. We see it in most industries. When you're just dealing with price, there's always going to be someone cheaper, or like you said, race to the bottom. So yeah, very good points. Thank you for that. I'm conscious of time, so a couple of things, but reflecting on your career, again, super interesting career. What lessons have been most instrumental for you throughout this journey?
I think the two main points that I've come to realize have really helped define my career is, one, don't forget about the human, and two, a minute of testing in a lab is worth 10 minutes of faffing about in the field. So let me address the first one. I am not the smartest person in the room. Like, I'm alone in the room right now, and I'm pretty sure I'm not smarter than Amica. I'm not the most hardworking person. I'm not coming from the craziest Ivy League background. But what's gotten me ahead in my career is, frankly, treating other humans with kindness, grace, and compassion. I would not have gotten my referral to Google if I hadn't known this wonderful human being who gave me that referral and treated him nicely and actually became genuine friends with him. I wouldn't have gotten my chance to run the electrical engineering team at Verdon Robotics, which is the agricultural robotics company, if I hadn't been nice to a guy who I knew through kiteboarding, And you just don't know what that random interaction with another human being can lead to. And that's not saying that like I kissed up to these people because I wanted a job out of them. I developed genuine relationships and friendships with these folks, and I got lucky enough that it led to really awesome places to learn more and to develop my career.
Yeah, I think
it's interesting.
Yeah,
like I'm in the Bay Area right now, and where I'm at, I do a lot of work with kids, whether it's giving small speeches with the Amica at a high school or mentoring a robotics club or whatever it is. And you talk to a lot of parents who are so tunnel visioned into like, okay, I need my child to get into Stanford so that they can get their MBA at Harvard so that they can get their job here. And they're so focused on these hard skills that they ignore how much value these soft skills actually provide.
Yeah.
It pays to have people be able to like you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think being genuine and, like you said, having genuine connections and friendships and caring about what other people have to say, what they're going through, their journey, their interest is key. It's a very valuable skill. You see antisocial people all the time, or people that are socially awkward or whatever, and sometimes you feel for them, especially if they're not trying. Or sometimes you think like, wow, this person's such an asshole. And you don't want to be the latter.
Yeah, but like interacting with other humans, it's a skill set. Like,
yeah, especially once you get in the professional world.
100%. It's something that you can learn and you can level up on.
Yeah, definitely. Very good.
Yeah, so to address the second point around testing, having spent a lot of my time in various uncomfortable situations in the field, like I've been trapped in a sandstorm in the high desert of Winnemucca, Nevada, on a boom lift. I've been working on a robot in a farm field in the depths of winter, or like in Puerto Rico where it's so humid, I'm pretty sure I could swim through the air. Getting all your ducks in a row in lab and putting in the time to test things and verify things, I mean, I wouldn't call it a skill set, more of a lifestyle choice that pays dividends.
Yeah. Love that. Very cool. Well, thank you for that. Look, it's been great having you on the show today, Leo. Thank you for sharing your insights, for bringing Amica as well. That's awesome for anyone watching this, and for hearing about everything that you guys are doing over there at Engineered Arts. Super interesting, super exciting about what's coming in the future. I definitely need to try and get to one of these venues. I'll probably go to the Sphere just because I love to go to Vegas. So it's a good excuse just so I can interact.
Great experience. They've done an amazing job out there. So that.
Love that. Any parting thoughts or wisdom that you want to share with any of our listeners, or where they can find you and Engineered Arts?
Well, first of all and foremost, thank you, Greg, for having us on the show. Really enjoy the opportunity to talk to someone with your background, your reputation within the recruiting industry. I'm very honored to be here. As far as if you want to learn more about Engineered Arts, Google us, check us out on LinkedIn. Follow us on LinkedIn or Instagram, and we typically post our sort of latest and greatest on social media. We like showing off just because we're a bunch of nerds that, well, we believe we build cool stuff, and we like showing off, So, yeah.
Good. As you should. You do build very cool stuff.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the time, Greg.
My pleasure, Leo. Thank you.